Well, today's going to be a pretty special video, guys, because I'm going to be walking through the neighborhood that I grew up in as a kid, and I lived here until I moved to Miami back in 2008. Simultaneously, while I'm talking about where I live right now in Florida and all the condo problems that we have over there. And before we just get into this video, I just want to show you how different things are right now, okay? Because when you guys see me walk on the beach and do my videos in Miami, I'm walking in my backyard, right? Well, this used to be my backyard right over here. Used to be one big cornfield back there. Not much has changed. Looks like it's not even a cornfield anymore. It's just weeds. This was my backyard. This was the view from my backyard. How different than the beach, huh? And the house that I grew up in is actually just a couple doors down where you see that pool over there. That used to be my backyard growing up. So my parents no longer live in this house. They split up years ago, but that was the house I grew up in over here. And we're gonna walk right past it in a little bit. And I thought it would just be cool to walk through this neighborhood after so many years of not being here and just take a walk down memory lane while talking about where I live right now. And where I live right now is seeing way more problems than over here, guys, because let me tell you, this neighborhood has barely changed since the 16 years that I used to live here, okay? But in Miami, things are changing dramatically, and really all over Florida with the condo problems in particular, okay? Because you have people that are trying to offload these condos left and right now because they just cannot afford the assessments. And I know you've heard me talk about this before, but I want to get into some specific examples to just show you how severe this potentially can be. Because if you're somebody who's looking to buy a condo in Florida, you need to be aware of what you could potentially be getting yourself into. There was this couple, they bought a place at the Cricket Club in Miami, and they paid $490,000 at the peak of the market back in 2022. Then they stuck an additional $100,000 into the condo with renovation costs, okay? They put big Italian porcelain tiles and marble countertops and an island in the kitchen, you know, the works to make the place look amazing. Well, I guess things aren't looking so good here either. Looks like this house is abandoned now. Potentially a foreclosure coming up. And now 2 years later, after buying this place, they are getting hit with a six-figure special assessment. These people are completely outraged because they've already sank $600,000 into this place, and now they're gonna have to sink, you know, an extra $134,000 into it. It's $134,000 per unit is the special assessment on this building right now, which is absolutely insane. So my old house, guys, I grew up in this house right here as I'm walking past it. It's a shame they kind of cut down all the trees. There used to be a huge pine tree over there, and well, the yard looks a lot different than I remember it. But the house is still the same house. But imagine this building got hit with a $30 million special assessment, okay? For things like waterproofing. They have to do a roof replacement. They have to do work on the facade with concrete restoration. And the problem is when you go decades and decades without doing this stuff and you wait until the worst time in history like now with inflation where it is to do all these repairs, that's how you get hit. And now these people are faced with a $134,000 assessment per unit. And I'm going to show you guys some examples here in a little bit of what's going on in the building. I pulled up some MLS data to just show you how bad the situation is there with people not being able to sell the places. The price drops and everything they have to do is insane right now. And later in this video, I just want to let you guys know I'm going to be talking about some issues with refinancing right now as well, because you're seeing a lot of people refinance and a lot of people are pushing people to refinance that are also a very bad time. So make sure you stick around for that. They have another guy who bought a unit in this building, okay, and he bought it for only $190,000 in 2019, so definitely didn't get hit as hard as this first couple. But he wanted to sell the unit after he found out about these assessments. He originally listed the place for $350,000, okay, but it actually had to sell it for only $110,000, guys. Think about what I'm saying right now. He bought for $190,000 in 2019. Pre-pandemic, that's pre-pandemic pricing for this building, okay? Before the Surfside collapse, before any of this stuff happened. And then he tried selling it for $350,000. only got $110,000 for it after all was said and done. Because you know why? That new buyer is going to have to pay that $134,000 special assessment. And so they're going to want a massive discount off of it, and also the headaches and the inconvenience of going through all the work that the building will need to go through as you're living in it. It's going to be an absolute nightmare. Maybe they offered this price because they won't even be able to live in it. Like, that's what I'm worried about when I go back to Miami. If my building is unlivable because of the noise situation, I'm going to move out for a little while until it's all done, and I'm just not going to live there until it's finished. I can't be around all this noise all the time while I'm trying to get work done and make these videos. It's just not going to happen. You guys won't see me anymore. Last week in a video, I talked to you guys about all the fake job listings out there, and something that I never realized up until recently, that one reason that we could have so many different fake job listings is because they're using that to harvest your data. Every time you apply at a job, they get your first, your last name, your address, your work history, they get your social security number, they get all kinds of records about you when you apply for these jobs that they have no intention of hiring you for. This is one great example of why I have partnered with Delete Me, okay? Delete Me is a subscription service that will remove your personal information from being sold online, because all of these places that are collecting your data without your permission or even with your permission are then turning around and selling it to other companies that want to use it for marketing or maybe even nefarious purposes. And as you guys can see with my own personal example here, in the last few months, the scan that was done with Delete Me on my account back in March, as of back then, I had 67 companies that still had my information on record. And fast forward to today, now only 36 companies, 36 data brokers have my information still that still need to be removed. So they are making tremendous progress removing my own personal information from different data brokers online. So if you value your online privacy and your personal information, make sure to get 20% off your Delete Me subscription today by joining using my link down below at joindeleteme.com/board-and-arrow. Now, obviously, this is a big problem with mostly older buildings. The old buildings are getting slapped with these special assessments like crazy right now. And really, the older they are, the worse they are, guys, because the chances are the older it is, the less work that's been done over the years. There's been more time to neglect it and kind of kick the can down the road, just like the government does. HOA communities are very good at doing that too. I used to have to stand right here waiting for the bus as a kid, okay? This is a side story for you since I'm here walking down memory lane. The bus would come up this way, drive us this way, and then drive around this entire huge farmland neighborhood, and I have to get on the bus a whole 1 hour before school, and I used to be the first neighborhood to get picked up and then the last one to get dropped off. So I used to spend 2 hours on the bus every day, and I absolutely hated it, guys. And just thinking about that makes me so happy that that's not my life anymore. Probably another reason I hated school too. So what can you do in order to avoid this? What can you do to make sure you're not buying in a building that has these problems? Well, I've told you guys before, the best things you can do are a few things. Number one, talk to the neighbors, because the neighbors will probably spill the beans. At least somebody's going to be honest and upfront with you and tell you what's going on. That's the first thing you can do. The second thing, make sure you get a copy of the building's last couple years of budget, the next couple years of projected budget, and the last year or two of the meeting minutes if you can. Those are all things that the current owner of the unit can request and give to you during your due diligence period, and you can see how is the building operating their budget. Are they operating at a loss? Do they have reserves? How much reserves do they have? What are they talking about in the meetings of the potential problems that are coming up? You'll find those issues in the minutes. And another red flag is the financing. A lot of lenders will not finance buildings that are in bad shape financially. They will do their own due diligence as well. And this was one of the red flags that this first couple should have paid more attention to, because when they went to go get the loan, they had to put a 25% down payment since the building had no reserves. So that's pretty typical. In fact, almost all the condos I've ever sold in Miami during my real estate career, people had to put 25% down. because the buildings did not have the reserves that the lender wants to see in order to make it a safe loan. So they consider it a higher risk, and they force you to take a bigger chunk of that risk by putting 25% down instead of, say, 10% or 5% when you go to buy a house like this. And the other problem when you have a building like this cricket club that gets these big special assessments, it kind of creates this divide between the residents, similar to politics, because you have people that want to do the work, that have the money, have no problem shelling out the extra cash. They want the value of the building to go up. This is especially true with investors when they buy condos. They want to have these assessments. They want to see the building completely renovated, so that way they can command higher rents. They can also have higher resale values in the future, so they want that. And on the other flip side, you have people that live there have to deal with the actual nightmare of having the renovations done, and also the expense that maybe they can't afford. And it kind of creates this divide between owners and not agreeing on what should be done and when. And you can already see this happening, guys. Like in South Florida alone, okay, the condo inventory has literally doubled to more than 18,000 units across South Florida. And insurance is a big driver of this, besides the special assessments. And what you're seeing is the people that own these condos literally just can't keep up with the cost. And even myself, I'm considering selling. Like, I want to sell, but my wife doesn't. I kind of on the same page with her long term. Like, she thinks it would be nice to have this place in the future, to be able to use it as like a beach house. You know, we have a place right on the beach that we can go to anytime later on when we get older, even if we don't live there. And I like the idea of it. I like the fantasy, but I think the fantasy is probably better than the reality, especially when you're looking at the cost to carry this place moving forward. So I'm on board with the dream. I'm just not really on board with the cost to own that dream. You know what I'm saying? So here's the other thing. 38% of the housing stock in Miami is all condos. You know, people wonder, oh, you always hear people say, there's probably going to be a bunch of them in these comments, oh, I would never buy a condo, you know, it's just a glorified apartment or whatever. But in big dense cities like Miami and New York and places where there's a lot of them, that's sometimes often your only choice, whether you're talking the location you need to be in for work, or whether you're talking about what you can afford, maybe both. Okay, and when almost 40% of all the housing in any given area is a condo, naturally you're going to have a lot of people gravitate towards them and buy them. You guys can see by me walking through my old neighborhood here that where I live now is nothing like where I grew up. There's not a condo within who knows how many miles of this place. It's all surrounded by cornfields. There's nothing out here. So the worst part about this whole condo sell-off is this is likely just the beginning. You know, we're seeing the condo inventory double, but you're likely going to see it get way worse after next year begins and the new law goes into effect, assuming there's no extension, also assuming there's no modification to these rules and people aren't outcrying and you know, forcing them to change these rules somehow so that way they don't have to come up with all this money starting next year. I don't know. And just to show you the difference in prices for some of these buildings, where you have old buildings versus new ones, okay, look at this. When you have buildings that were built less than 30 years ago, those units are selling on average for about 38% more than they did in 2020. And when you have buildings that were built more than 30 years ago, they're selling for 12% less than they did in 2020. So people are already getting pre-pandemic prices on these condos, just like this example I shared with you earlier. This guy bought the place in 2019 and just sold it in 2024 for less than he bought it for then. So people also think that this can't happen to you when you buy a house. It can, guys. I've showed you examples here in Rockford also where they're literally selling the house for like $40,000 more like 30 years later. That's a loss. I don't care how you want to look at it, the nominal value might be higher, but it's a loss because when you factor in inflation, all the repairs they had to make on the house over the years, they are selling that house for way less than they actually paid for it back in the 80s. Hey, just to give you guys an idea, I wasn't kidding. Once you get out of the neighborhood, this is where I grew up. Way out in the distance there is what formerly used to be the Chrysler plant, now Stellantis, and they just laid everybody off too. Another quick tidbit about the economy, so now they're not producing cars over there. So that's it. But this is not really close to anything. So So now what's happening too with a lot of these people that want to sell the condos is they are forced to sell it to people who can pay cash, because a lot of people can no longer get financing in these buildings because the buildings literally don't qualify for financing because they're in such bad shape physically and financially that no lender will touch it. And so when you're in that situation, like this cricket club, the only way that you're going to get a sale is if somebody pays cash. And guess what? People are going to want a big discount for that. And here's what I mean. Here's an example of all the closed sales last year in the cricket club. So take a look at the difference in some of these listing prices and sale prices. You have this listing here, started off asking $725, sold for $687. This one started $679, sold for $604. You have one that even listed at $449 and sold for $300. You have one that listed at $449 and sold at $390. Another one listed at $350, sold at $275. You know, these are major price cuts on these units to get them sold. And the people that are trying to sell them right now that haven't sold yet are in the same boat. Because take a look, basically every single unit that's for sale in this building right now has a price cut, and there's so many of them, I couldn't even put it on one page of the MLS here. There's more than 25 units for sale here, but all of them have price cuts. And we're talking big price cuts. $299 down to $250. This number you see in the left-hand column is the original listing price, and the one on the right is the listing price today. You know, you have this other unit from $324,000 down to $180,000. You got $399,000, basically 400 grand. They're down to $192,000. Still can't sell it. You have another one at the bottom here. They were listed at $530,000 and are now down to $295,000 and still can't sell it, guys. So what does that tell you? Number one, economy's not good. Number two, people are not going to be buying these buildings that are falling apart, okay? And if they do, they want a massive, massive discount. I'll tell you one thing that is like Miami out here today, guys, is the heat. I guess I'm not going to be able to escape the Miami heat until I finally get to California. It feels just like I'm in Miami today. With the heat index, it feels like 98 degrees today out here. It's very hot. And then with all this going on, right, what do they want you to do? They want you to borrow the equity out of your house, because what better time to do it than now when people have all this equity, right? I've been seeing so many stories pushing people into getting home equity lines of credit and home equity loans because everyone has equity. Like even my friend Dan, when you had him on the video the other day, he said that people are sending him offers in the mail. Let's borrow against the house, but he's not dumb enough to do it. And here's some of the latest nonsense that they're using to try to convince people that it's a good idea to get a home equity loan or a HELOC right now. Check out what this person says. In a low interest rate environment, which could occur soon if inflation cools, yeah, okay, and the Fed lowers rates, a home equity loan or cash out refinance could make the most sense. Really? So when are they lowering rates again? Oh, that's right, they're not, because they just had a meeting and there's no rate cut. And even if they do cut rates soon, it's going to be by 0.25%, quarter point rate cut. Or what about a home equity line of credit? Here's the flip side of that. HELOCs, or home equity lines of credit, that's what HELOC stands for, are variable interest rate loans, kind of like an adjustable rate mortgage and a second mortgage on your house that's adjustable rate. Well, right now the average rate on a HELOC is close to 9%. So you're going to pay 9% interest to borrow against your house, and then if for some reason you can't pay that back, not only are you on the hook for a high interest rate, but also you now are going to lose your house because you made a big financial mistake. They're going to foreclose on your house if this happens to you. Here's the funny thing too, guys. They say the other thing that you can do is a cash out refinance, right? It's interesting because it says right here in the first paragraph of this story that it doesn't make sense for most people to do this right now because most people today have a lower interest rate than what's being offered out there for a cash out refinance. Yet you're seeing a record number of people do cash out refinances for their house right now. Well, why is that? I covered this a couple of weeks ago actually, and the reason is simple. It's because people are refinancing their houses to pull the equity out and use that money to live off of. This is not a theory. This is a fact that's backed up by data. Because according to the Mortgage Bankers Association, the refinance index soared 28% a few weeks ago and was up 28% from 1 year ago, guys. That is a massive increase in the amount of people refinance, but yet this story that's pushing people to refinance says it probably doesn't make sense to do a cash out refinance right now, but people are still doing it. Instead, they want you to take a HELOC because that's a higher interest rate loan, or they want you to do a home equity loan, which is basically having a second mortgage on your house. They want that recurrent payment. They want you in more debt, so that way they're just collecting more interest from you month after month. That's the game plan right now. And even the federal government is sticking their hand in that pot, and they're going to be doing the same. We covered this about a month and a half ago when I first heard that they were thinking about doing this, but Freddie Mac just launched a second lien purchase pilot program. Okay, and this was open for discussion and opinion, and a lot of people were against it, but they decided to go ahead and do it anyhow. And Freddie Mac is offering this as an alternative to cash out refinancing in a high interest rate environment. This is just another government program to keep people spending money that they don't have. Follow so far? So they're setting a cap on it at the very least. They're only going to be giving out about $2.5 billion only, right, for this pilot program over the next 18 months. And the individual loan limit will be $78,277. Guys, you tell me that's not stimulus, okay? If you got an extra $78,000 right now and you're down on your financial luck, don't you think that would probably help you avoid having your own little personal recession and avoid maybe losing your house and avoid maybe missing some payments than you otherwise would miss, maybe getting your car repossessed? Absolutely. This is just yet another stimulus program being done by the government to prop things up a little bit longer. And you notice it's only 18 months, so by the time the election is finished, it's going to be over about a year after that. At least they do have some guidelines here. The first mortgage must have a 24-month seasoning period, which means you can't have just bought the house and then 2 months later go out there and try to get this second mortgage from Freddie Mac. Okay, so you have to have bought the house at least 2 years ago, and it needs to be your primary residence. So investors are not going to be able to use this except for the ones who lie and cheat and claim that they live at the property when in fact it's an investment property. I guarantee you there will be fraud, people getting their hands on this money and then going forward using that money to buy more real estate, guys. That's how it always works, and this is how it's going to work this time. That's how it worked during the pandemic. And they say that after this 18-month period ends, the FHFA will analyze the data to determine whether the objectives of the pilot were met. Well, of course the objectives are going to be met because it's going to stimulate the economy before the election. That's going to be the objective. So yes, they're going to meet that objective. I can already predict that before the program is over. And there was plenty of public outcry against this, but the government said, you know what, we'll do it anyways, which is kind of interesting because there was another study done recently that showed many more people would have preferred to have an all-out recession rather than have the level of inflation we have right now, because people realize that this is far worse than any recession that we could have had. And once again, they're aiming this at a lot of low-income borrowers, people who don't really have any money, but they have a house so they can borrow against it. So it's just one thing after another, guys. The government is going to continue doing everything they can to prop this economy up for a little while longer. They've proven this time and time again, and this program is no different. And I get it. These are all great arguments for people who say there's going to be no housing crash, because when you see them constantly doing things like this, even when people don't want it or they don't ask for it, then clearly there's a bigger agenda in the works here. And that agenda is, let's keep this economy on a roll for as long as we can under our watch. Wow, they never actually redid this driveway. This driveway still looks exactly like it did when I used to live here. But I think it's criminal what they're doing. The government is spending tax dollars on things that we don't approve of. They spend it on illegal aliens coming across the border. No one said okay to that. They give free money to people that don't deserve it. Nobody said okay to that. They're now starting this pilot program to do second mortgages on people's properties. Nobody said okay with that. We didn't vote for any of this stuff, but yet they go ahead and do it. So that's the reality of today's world. Stimulate, stimulate, stimulate until we run out of gas. So If you enjoyed this video in my old neighborhood, please make sure you subscribe to the channel. And if you don't want to wait for my next video to come out, check out this one on the screen right over here, and I'll see you in the next one.